Body powder that you can spray? What could be next?
Hey, what's up? It's your boy Psycho, aka Sniper 98. It's another twofer. This time it's going to be on Berserk Akitoki. I was actually meaning to give him a video too at some point, but I figured now would be the perfect time to do so for reasons I'll explain later in the video, hopefully, if I fucking remember to talk about them, not forget like I always do on stream whenever I say I'll do something. Anyways, Berserk Akitoki is obviously a 5-star berserker who debuted with the 1 million downloads milestone for NA, or the 4 million downloads milestone for JP. He's your archetypal come in and smash Zerker who's also an extremely useful farmer. Given the last 3 videos so far, including this one, you should probably be seeing a pattern by now. Kintaro has 12,150 HP and 12,712 attack at level 90 and 13,311 HP and 13,915 attack at level 100. He's got Zerk class, star gen, and weight, 1.03% MP charge on attack, 5% charge on defense, and a 52% death rate, and he's lawful good because he's a good boy. He's got your typical Zerk triple buster deck with a buster NP. His buster cards hit once, his arts and quick cards hit twice, and his extra hits 3 times. Immediately what should stand out is his insanely high attack rating. According to the wiki, he's got the 3rd highest attack value in the game behind Ku Alter and Jalter. While berserkers are known for doing a lot of damage in FGO, Akitoki is particularly noteworthy here thanks to how the game calculates damage with buff stacking and whatnot. So the higher your attack rating is, the more damage you can squeeze out of it. But other than his beefy attack rating, nothing else is as impressive, unfortunately. Because he's one of the earliest servants in the game, he's got the symptoms of early FGO game design with his deck having very low hit counts, which in turn means that combined with his single arts and quick cards, he basically won't be doing any significant MP charging, if you're not using a skill that is, or star jetting on his own. I called Drake in the other video that I put out today kind of a glass cannon, but Akitoki is the true glass cannon between the two of them, since he's got even lower HP than she does, and he's a berserker, so he'll be taking double damage from everyone else. Needless to say, he's not really in any position to survive for a long time, not even in normal battles, much less challenge fights, and all that nonsense. So if his only notable trait so far is his thick boy attack rating, do his skills reflect that? Oh, you gonna learn today. Alex Mendez's first skill is Monster Strength A+, which increases attack by 30 to 50% for 1 turn on a 7 to 5 turn cooldown. This is his mana burst, only it's not actually a buster buff, just a straight up attack buff. In other words, it's his uses with his MP skill, like most mana burst type skills should be. At first glance, it might seem like a waste to give Akitoki a mana burst that only buffs his attack and not his buster cards, but I'll explain later why this isn't such a big deal, and how possibly it's even an advantage for him depending on how you look at it. His second skill is Animal Communication C, which charges his own MP gauge by 30 to 50% on an 8 to 6 turn cooldown. 50% battery? Oh, you already know what I think about this, baby. And his third skill is Natural Body A, which increases his own offensive debuff resist by 60 to 120% for 3 turns, and recovers his HP by 1000 to 3000 on a 7 to 5 turn cooldown. This unfortunately is his weakest skill and one of the glaring symptoms of early FGO servant design that I mentioned earlier. Because it's clear that Akitoki is meant to be a dump truck of a damage pump, it would be really bad if something decided to put an attack debuff on him of some kind. So DW was like, okay, we'll give Golden a specific debuff resist that only wards against things that debuff his attack in any way, since that's all he should care about, and fuck him if anything else gets through. Which is kinda like if you went to Five Guys and they give you a burger with no buns because they thought you wouldn't give a shit. Well, as it turns out, because offensive debuff resist is a specific type of debuff resist, it's honestly pretty rare that you'll ever come across an enemy who actually bothers debuffing your attack in some way outside of challenge fights, and y'all should already know how Akitoki feels about those. By that point, it's much better just to have general debuff resist instead that covers everything, or in Akitoki's case, he's better off worrying about whatever it is that might kill him in 2 hits. The heal is also rather mediocre, not because the actual HP recovery amount is bad or anything, anything. 3k is a solid heal in most cases, but Kintoki isn't one of them because he's a berserker who bakushis in like 3 hits, just like most JP free-to-play players on New Year's banners. It'd have been much better for him if he had an evade or invul somehow, or at the very least guts, so that he can have some way of surviving a fatal hit once, but as it stands, he doesn't have anything like that, so he's stuck with this shitty skill that's pretty much worthless when it comes to things that he does best. And if you come here right after watching that Drake video, you should already know what those are. His passive skills are Mad Enhancement E, which increases his own buster performance by 2%, and Divinity D, which increases his damage by 125. These are both really mediocre passive skills, almost to the point where they're negligible. They're those kinds of skills where you kind of look at them and just be like, oh, that's cool, I guess. Mama's Boy's MP is Golden Spark, which is a single target buster MP that ignores defense buffs, deals 600 to 1000% damage, and also has a 50% to 100% chance to stun its target if it survives. Its meme potential and reverse weeaboo aside, it's a simple and incredibly powerful MP designed to one-shot anything you want to yeet out of the game. And in case you don't successfully yeet your target, you've almost always got at least a 50-50 shot at stunning it so you can complete the yeet. And because Kintoki also has a 50% battery, and there are plenty of 50% starting charge Cs and Wavy Boy in the game, you should have already seen where this is going. So by this point, Space Jam Boy's mechanical design should have already come together. He's meant to be your go-to one-shot monster for boss battles. Like your stereotypical berserker, he's meant to pummel trash mobs with the buster cards, and when a tough enemy with a lot of HP shows up, he pops his battery, Waver fills in the rest, and Kintoki smashes. This would have been fine for him if DW didn't anticipate FGO surviving longer than a year and a half, but the problem is that's exactly what they did. Like I mentioned earlier, as one of the earliest servants in the game, Kintoki's design is riddled with flaws that early FGO design had, back when DW didn't know how to make servant kits properly since they didn't know how the game's meta would shape up to be in the future. Now, in current content JP, you've got shit like break bars, boss gimmicks, and other annoying shit that smashes Kintoki right back and make his design flaws really obvious, thus rendering him nowadays mostly ineffective in contemporary challenge quests, with one notable exception being Siegfried's challenge quest during last Neurofest, in which Kintoki's defense peers could most likely one-shot him with enough buff stacking. And even in normal free quest battles and non-boss story battles in NA as of late and going forward, and certainly in JP, the quote-unquote trash mobs are starting to have more and more HP, meaning that Kintoki can't just dunk on them like he used to. And the longer the enemies are alive, the more likely Kintoki takes a hit that he really can't afford to take since his own HP is abysmal and he's a berserker. And as many of you know by looking ahead at future content, currently NA is on the cusp of entering a new phase of the game where gameplay starts to change significantly, namely with the break bar mechanic, and this is the point in time when Kintoki starts to fall off hard in meta viability. So what redeems him? What still keeps him relevant in a time when, for all intents and purposes, he should be nothing but an ugly remnant of the past of DW's initial ways of screwed up servant design 3 years ago? Well, the answer should be obvious since I've said it multiple times already. It's farming, and we can break this down into 3 reasons, just like in my Drake video. First, let's just get this out of the way, but Kintoki's got a 50% battery. Y'all have already heard me yap about battery skills every other video, it seems like, by this point, but this is especially important on him because there are hardly any single target SSRs within the 50% battery, even in JP, where Sanzo and Moriarty are the only other single target SSRs with 50% batteries or more, whereas these kinds of batteries are usually allotted to AoE SSRs instead. Second, the fact that Monstrous Strength as a skill is an attack buff and not a mana burst style buster buff is significant because it scales really hard with buster buffs that you do give him. Maybe in the past, when he first came out, the skill didn't really seem as good as a straight up mana burst, but now that we have lots of servants who give buster buffs, and even a whole Mystic code that has its own targetable mana burst, Monstrous Strength allows Kintoki to pump out even more thick boy damage than was possible thanks to multiplicative scaling. Third, Kintoki is a berserker single target SSR with the 3rd highest attack rating in the game. even still in JP. In a lot of farming nodes, you'll frequently come across single targets that have a lot of HP, so Kintoki, being a berserker and thus effective against almost everything, is a natural go-to for them. The sheer damage output that Kintoki is capable of stems from the fact that he's an SSR, and while I understand that not everyone is a dirty whale and a half, for those few of you who are fortunate enough to be able to whale for multiple copies of him, or God forbid get him to MP5, you know just how hard he can dunk shit. When you combine all these reasons, what you have is a golden berserker, pun intended, who's perfect for farming both free quests and event nodes, especially for those with starting charge CEs, obviously, and can be applied in almost any node that has a single enemy for one of its waves. Nobody else comes anywhere close to him in terms of sheer flexibility when it comes to single target farmers, because if you wanted to try, you'd also have to be, at the very least, another Berserker SSR with a 50% battery and a damage steroid of some kind, and DW hasn't made another one like that for the past 3 years, probably because they realize just how insanely strong Kintoki himself is. He's so good at single target farming, in fact, that on its farming tier list, Farmville evaluates single target servants on the primary merit of whether or not they're better at it than he is in the first place, and if they are somehow, by how much. Shoutouts again to Gotcha for the farming tier lists. The only times when Golden isn't quite effective enough to comfortably one-shot something is if they have extremely high health pools, the enemies that is, which can definitely happen, but by that point you're probably going to struggle with regular counterclassing servants anyway. Despite this, Golden's proved his worth many times over the past year. He's been part of farming team comps for pretty much every event so far that's involved starting charge CEs like Da Vinci, Onigashima, Neurofest, Christmas, and most recently Solomon, which is the reason why I'm making this video in the first place, since people are finally starting to see Kintoki's true power with this event, since he can just one-shot basically every demon pillar that isn't a berserker. And Solomon doesn't even have any event Cs for that matter. And, as a bonus, Kintoki's MP is extremely short, animation-wise that is, allowing you to squeeze in more runs in the same amount of time compared to if you just chosen to go with another servant with a longer MP animation, and luckily this stays the same when he gets his animation update in the future, though I can't say the same for his skill animations. Just like with Drake, for My Hero Academia Boye, team comps should really depend on what you're looking to farm, and usually you should look to provide teammates who can give him buster buffs, unless he already does enough damage where extra buffs don't matter. If you want to try using him outside of farming, give him taunt walls like George so that they can tank hits for him and keep him alive longer, since one straight hit on Kintoki probably means that he's already close to death, especially with the kinds of enemies you're starting to see nowadays. Again, insert any 50% starting charge CE of your choice so Kintoki can turn one
Smash.
Other than that, LZO and other buster type CEs are ideal for Kintoki given his Zerk deck. If you're more concerned about keeping Kintoki alive for longer than 3 turns, give him volume in so that he's got some breathing room and doesn't have to worry about getting sniped 2 turns into a fight. His own bond CE is Golden Glass, which increases his own MP damage by 30% and gives him a 30% chance to charge his own MP gauge by a flat 5% every time he lands an attack. This is actually a really good CE for him on paper, because the 30% MP damage buff would scale really well with his monster's strength and other buster buffs that he might get for teammates, and the 5% MP charge would complement his battery pretty well too. Unfortunately, the CE's biggest drawback is the fact that all max bond CEs only give 100 extra HP and attack, which means that even with the 30% MP damage buff, Kintoki might not do as much damage as he would with a Super Scope or another level 100 Gotcha CE, depending on what other buffs he gets. And if you happen to have Black Grail, there'd literally be no reason to ever use his Bond CE by that point anyway. And the MP charge mechanic wouldn't matter also because Kintoki's designed to one-shot anything that he's attacking. Goldilocks is a top-tier farming berserker who's geared to raffle stomp anything that he can launch his MP at, and he's so good at it that DW apparently doesn't think that he needs any buffs at all, despite the fact that his kit is among the oldest in the game. At first glance, he might just seem like your average no-brain Zerk main whose only job is to hit big red buttons until something dies, which, to be fair, he does that really well, too. But use him to his fullest potential, and he can rip single targets a new one the same way Regin calls everything a damn burb. And that's all you need to know about the absolute unit himself. I mean, for fuck's sake, look at his final ascension art and ignore the fact that he has no nipples. Go check out my other Drake video that I posted along this one if you haven't already somehow. Thanks for watching, Merry belated Christmas, and Happy New Year's, and until next time, deuces.
Myself in the mirror, and the noises around me fade. No